Hello and welcome to a new episode of Die Kulturmittler, the IFA podcast on foreign cultural policy. My name is Amira El Ahl and I'm delighted to have you with me again for this episode. We enter a question or a prompt into ChatGPT or Google Gemini and receive a response within seconds. It is convenient and it saves time. And in fact, artificial intelligence has become an integral part of many people's daily work, not just in the tech sector, but also in governance, education, or healthcare. But what many people may not know when using AI systems, they are not neutral. The imbalanced geopolitical concentration of AI development in the global north has implications on the design of AI systems, often overlooking diverse cultural contexts and marginalizing non-Western languages, epistemologies, and communities, especially in the so-called global south. So, how can we make AI systems more inclusive? Today, we're joined by Saiph Savage and Lili to discuss the systemic risks of AI, including algorithmic bias, digital colonialism, and cultural homogenization. Dr. Saiph Savage is an assistant professor at Northeastern University and a research collaborator with the National Autonomous University of Mexico, UNAM. And Lili Savage is a UX researcher and consultant at the Civic Tech Lab at UNAM and a research affiliate at the Civic AI Lab at Northeastern University. Based on their latest research findings, we will explore what promising interventions through inclusive design and policy already exist and how existing systems can be adapted to make AI safer and more inclusive for everyone. Drawing on their recent published study, Inclusive and Secure Artificial Intelligence, a Global Perspective on Policy and Technical Developments, conducted within the IFA research program Culture and Foreign Policy, the authors offer concrete recommendations on how to work towards a future with ethical and responsible AI. Dr. Saiph Savage and Lili Savage, welcome to Die Kulturmittler.
Thank you, Amira. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us. It's a great honor to be here.
We're very happy that you found the time to be with us, so thank you for that. So in your study, you state that AI technologies often reflect the values and assumptions of dominant groups in reinforcing patterns of exclusion and inequality. So can you explain to us how these inequalities are expressed in AI systems? Maybe Saiph, I don't know, would you like to start?
Yeah, so most of the AI systems that we know have been trained with data from the global north. And so this means that the content with which these AI models were trained with comes from the global north. And so there can be things related to the cultures of the global south that these AI systems simply do not understand. And so things that might be normal for the global south to do can be seen as something completely inappropriate for the AI, and the AI can then suddenly also have certain biases. For example, Microsoft had created a chatbot called Die, and it got radicalized. It started calling people that they were Nazis, that they were hailing Hitler, etc. And so what Microsoft did was that it then created a list of black words. This was a chatbot that was, again, designed from the global north. And part of the black words that it selected, this is words that the chatbot should not connect with, were things related to the Middle East, which in the minds of the designers from the global north, well, of course, you want to eliminate anything related to the Middle East because it relates to terrorism, and maybe then people will be engaging in terrorist conversations, etc. We do not want our chatbot to be related to this. What started to happen? If you suddenly start to talk to the chatbot about, a falafel, certain cultural things related to the Middle East, the chatbot would not engage with you. It would say things like, oh, you know what, I'm not talking about these subjects. And so suddenly you have entire cultures that are erased because you're designing technology, AI technology, from a global north perspective.
So was that tackled, that problem? I mean, that's terrible.
Yeah. I think part of what we need to do is we need to raise our voices and we need to expose how these designs are problematic so that companies and also governments who are allowing these technologies to come out can have certain regulations to think about what we can do to address those problems.
So, Lili, maybe you can elaborate on that, like why we do need inclusive AI. I mean, what impact do the current commercially available AI systems and apps have on affected groups such as women, for example, or people of color? I mean, I think there's probably a massive amount of examples out there.
Yeah. Just as Dr. Saiph explained, a lot of the apps out there, for example, new apps or practices are based on data that is given from the global north. So based on Western men, for example. So there's in facial recognition bias, they tend to perform poorly, for example, on darker skinned individuals, especially women. So studies have found that they misclassify darker-skinned women up to 35% of the time compared to less than 1% for lighter-skinned men.
Wow.
So this has led to the misidentification, for example, of Black and Asian individuals and even contributed to wrongful arrests, also healthcare disparities because then they also tend to misdiagnose dermatological conditions, for example. And also for women, you mentioned gender stereotyping. Some natural language processing models often learn stereotypes from their training data, associating male pronouns with professions like engineer and female pronouns with roles like nurse or homemaker. Also, similarly, digital assistants like Siri were initially designed with female-coded voices and subservient personas, reinforcing then cultural assumptions about gender roles. And this also affects some hiring practices. They turn discriminatory because some AI-driven hiring tools have been shown to disadvantage also women and people of color as well. Like there's a really known case from Amazon's now abandoned recruiting tool that was found to penalize resumes that mentioned women's colleges or gender-related organizations, for example.
Well, it's really crazy, no? I mean, nobody would think about this when they use AI or whatever ChatGPT in their daily lives. But so how can we ensure that an AI system is developed in an inclusive way, since it hasn't happened yet, I guess? And does that not also reinforce structural inequalities?
Yeah, part of the solution is via red teaming, for example. So what is red teaming? Red teaming is all about you have a system, you're going to stress that system to its core. This is, for example, you might now try, hey, let's assume that we have people from the alt-right that are going to be using our system for their nefarious purposes. So red teaming is like you created a security in your house, for example, an alarm security, and you're paying people to try to break into your house so you can see the flaws in your system. So in the terms of AI, you can now pay people to stress out your system so that you can see, okay, for example, people from the alt-right suddenly started to use my system in those extreme ways. How is my system going to respond? Is it responding properly? Is it responding not properly? And so that way you can address, for example, those changes. That was the problem, for example, that Microsoft had with its original chatbot, Tai, which it had tested it within one environment, which was WeChat. That's a Chinese social media platform. Mm-hmm. It had not tested it within the broad internet, where, for example, you have alt-right groups. And so when the alt-right groups took their chatbot of Microsoft, they weaponized it and they trained it to be now a Nazi-loving chatbot. So red teaming can help you because you can stress out your system, identify the biases that it can have, and that way, as engineers and designers, you can start to improve your system.
Mm-hmm. And do you have like examples of where like inclusive AI already exists or where like approaches are promising in this direction? Maybe Lili?
Mm-hmm. Some examples, there have been some community-led initiatives or language preservation projects, for example, in some African countries. Mm-hmm. That make an effort to focus improving natural language processing for African languages. So this demonstrates how community-driven approaches can lead to a more inclusive development through this participatory design, where the communities affected by AI are involved directly in its creation from the very beginning. So this is something that our report argues, is that ensuring inclusive AI requires more than just the technical fixes. Just like Dr. Saiph said, it demands structural change focused on justice by practice. So the most promising approach is this participatory design.
I find that interesting because, like, when you look at existing AI models, I guess it is not realistic to replace them, but are there ways to adapt them? Because I don't think they are very participatory, no?
So something that, for example, we're doing at Northeastern University and also at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, UNAM, is we use participatory design to understand the limitations that current systems have. For example, we identified that current AI tools that recommend labor to workers, well, they're following also a global north perspective where they structure time and they're structuring everything based on the global north, how people in the global north view time. And we identified, you know what, for people in the global south where time is more flexible, this is actually problematic for their work schedule. And so based on that, we now created with the workers themselves new tools that recommend them work based on their different time schedules that they have. And so the participatory design can help you so that you understand people's needs. You also understand how do people imagine the technology so that now as engineers, we can create technology that better adapts to their people's backgrounds and better covers what they want.
Yeah, like you said, it is probably not realistic to replace them, but to retrofit them. So existing AI systems can be improved to be more inclusive. And some of those ways are, for example, retraining with diverse data so that we can have more ethically sourced and diverse data sets. So like Dr. Saiph said, so that they don't just focus on one particular data set. Also, transfer learning allows, for example, a pre-trained global model to be fine-tuned on a smaller localized data set. And this can help the model to learn to detect context-specific abuse, like machismo-related harassment in Latin America, for example, without needing to build a new system from scratch. There's also the human-in-the-loop oversight that, rather than relying on full automation, it collaborates. And in this model, the AI flags potential issues like hate speech, but then human moderators who are trained in cultural contexts make the final decision. And they ensure the fairness and the accountability that some AI systems until now cannot achieve. There's also integrating explainability tools. So systems can be made more transparent by improving them with these tools that clarify why an AI made a certain decision. So, for example, why certain content was flagged, which enhances trust and allows users to challenge these errors.
That's interesting. You said something that I find very interesting. You said ethically sourced. Well, I would like to come to the point that I made earlier that, like, maybe it's not so realistic to replace existing AI systems. And I wonder if owners are even interested in doing that. I mean, as an example, like Elon Musk, he has Grok. It's like an AI-powered chatbot that his company developed. And he said it should be politically neutral and maximally truth-seeking. But in fact, like in practice, he and his artificial intelligence company, XAI, have tweaked the chatbot to make its answers more conservative on many issues, according to an analysis of thousands of its responses by the New York Times, who just recently wrote about this. So the shifts appear in some cases to reflect Mr. Musk's political priorities. So it doesn't seem like he's really interested in being more inclusive. So I wonder, how can you make things like this more neutral or even ethically sourced? Because it seems it's all about the people who feed them, these systems.
Yeah, and also the people who own them as well, because as you said, the people who own them get to make those decisions. And also part of the problem is, on one hand, if you don't have the checks and balances, why would they be motivated to ensure that they're neutral? And then also another problem is it's getting harder and harder for new actors to be able to get into the game because they don't have the computational resources, the data to be able to compete and create their own models to also get into the playing field.
So what can you do about this problem?
I have some examples that are also mentioned in our report. So mainly, I will talk about 4 things. So mandate cultural impact assessments for all high-risk AI systems in delicate areas like hiring, healthcare, and law enforcement. So governments should require a mandatory cultural impact assessment before deployment. And this evaluation would identify potential adverse effects on a community's norms, values, and languages. It should also be co-developed with local community representatives so that it's fully respectful of the culture of that place. Because some people just want to impose technology without the context, right? We can also use procurement as leverage. So guidelines and giving preferential treatment for government contracts to AI vendors who can prove their systems meet high standards for fairness, transparency, and inclusivity, making this way ethical practice a competitive advantage. We can also require transparency to disclose any cultural and linguistic composition of their training datasets so that we can have accountability for the people. And a very appealing idea for the owners would be to provide incentives. So beyond mandates or things they have to do, government can offer incentives like dedicated funding streams or grants, which only organizations demonstrating ethical AI practice are eligible for. And this would encourage broader adoption of inclusive design by making it also financially attractive.
Well, I guess somebody like Elon Musk doesn't really care about grants, but but let's see, like on a geopolitical level, some people speak about digital colonialism by global tech companies. What do you think about this? Is this an exaggerated fear or indeed a problem that should be addressed? I think you already gave some examples about that.
So in our research, for example, we have also seen that the problem with digital colonialism is that it means that some workers are actually earning less because they're being forced, for example, to use interfaces, AI tools that were designed for people in the global north. They're not accounting for how culturally these workers are operating. And so they're in the disadvantage of having to now adapt their working style to however the global north is telling them. And so they're not as successful. And so in our research, we also showed that if you create interfaces that can adapt to workers' cultural backgrounds, you can suddenly increase drastically their wages, especially from the ones from the global south.
And I feel aside from the wages that are very important, you can also stop this reinforcement of dependency because this dynamic positions countries, for example, in the global south, just as passive consumers of foreign AI, which limits their ability to develop their own technologies. And if we stop reinforcing this dependency, then this would also reinforce or improve the economic and technological areas in these countries.
Absolutely. So it's important to give them also the tools, to develop their own AI. Now, there is a growing number of conferences and frameworks at the multilateral level that work towards a global governance of AI. For example, through recommendations and frameworks that give actors from the global south a seat at the table. But you write in your study, and I quote, although ethical guidelines like the UNESCO recommendation of the ethics of artificial intelligence call for inclusivity and cultural diversity, implementation remains weak. So what practical measures can governments and politicians and decision makers implement to guarantee that developers of AI systems implement or adhere to these ethical principles stipulated in these frameworks and recommendations? I guess this is a problem, no? Lili?
One action could be, again, to facilitate participatory design within cultural institutions that are uniquely positioned to convene the local communities, artists, researchers, civil society groups that are often excluded from the AI development and are most of the time that are the most passionate about this. So the ones that want to create change, but maybe lack either the background, the funds. So if we create a space for them to co-create, then that would make a change. Maybe through institutions like the Goethe Institute or IFA, the IFA support is really important.
Saiph, maybe can you give examples of how this could look like, on the ground?
Yeah. So, for example, some things that even Mexico was doing was they were creating working groups with different stakeholders that involved industry, NGOs, academics, government actors to think together, okay, what type of regulatory AI should we have? How do you also motivate the different actors to want to get involved? So, for example, for academia, some things that were important was, hey, you know what? We want some computational power. We also want to be able to access certain grants. And so Mexico was looking into creating funding for universities who are participating in this AI initiative. The industry actors, for example, a lot of them was, you know what, we are creating these new AI technologies. We want end users, and the government was helping them to deploy their systems like at scale because the government can access a large number of citizens. But in order to ensure that they were able to get that visibility that the government was giving them, they had to follow certain regulations. And so, as Lili was mentioning, part of the solution is through, again, this participatory design, this co-design, where you get all of the stakeholders involved and you start to understand what are their motivations to participate, and you leverage those motivations to get them to participate more ethically with AI. And also, I think another thing that you mentioned was, well, for example, somebody like Elon Musk, why would he be motivated to follow these rules? I think part of it is creating an environment where there is competition so that the other stakeholders, for example, have the resources they need in order to create a competing model to, for example, something like Elon Musk. And they're motivated, for example, let's say, okay, I'm going to create our own model that is actually more neutral. And now Elon Musk will be motivated to have models that are not as biased because people might not even want to use his model because they will understand that it has biases, that it's not offering them the best type of services.
But I mean, the problem, I guess, is that people like Elon Musk have political motives, no? And that's what they are also driving their chatbot to put forward, no?
Yeah, but you know what? It's important to understand that technology is never neutral. And technology is designed with those political motivations behind it. And so once you understand it, we have to also, you know what, let's level the playing field. Let's get other actors involved that have other political ideologies. Maybe now they are actually a little bit more neutral, or they have other goals aside from what the goals of a billionaire are.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because I read a quote. It was also as part of this article from the New York Times from Oren Etzioni. He's an AI researcher and a professor emeritus of computer science at the University of Washington. He said, never trust an AI system, never trust a chatbot because it's a puppet whose strings are being pulled behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And I guess a lot of people don't really realize that when they use these systems day in and day out, no? And especially, I mean, you don't use these systems with the knowledge that it's actually designed by the global north and fed with information from, you know, a certain kind of people. And a lot of people are just left behind. I guess most people don't really know this. So coming back to your study, who are you aiming the study at? I mean, which people should read it and what is your aim with it?
This study is written in such a way that anyone can read it and understand it. It's not meant for experts only, but we try to write it so that a broader audience can read it, because this is exactly what we're trying to achieve, is to make AI reachable instead of keeping it for a few, not to have anything personally against him, but like Elon Musk, which is a source of controversy, yeah. But I think this type of controversy only highlights the urgent need for a more distributed, participatory, and culturally aware approach to AI development. So this is why our discussion isn't about a few people in power, only for the government. This is written for the people, for artists, of course, AI experts as well, for anyone out there. And so maybe I can take this opportunity to invite everyone to read our report to see how we can move from a conversation to a more concrete action so that we can consider the voice of everyone out there who will be actually using and who will be a part of this world where this AI exists.
Absolutely. And I do highly recommend reading it. It's a very interesting read. Do you have maybe a positive example where in the global south, maybe there is already these kind of AI systems being developed, or like, something like the, AI as a cultural commons? I mean, do you have examples where people in the global south are having a seat at the table?
Well, part of it is what I discussed about the research that we're doing with UNAM, the National Autonomous University of Mexico, that's in Mexico City. So there we have been designing with the workers from Latin America in the global south in general, AI tools that are better adapted to how the global south views time. So one thing that happens is that in the global south, culturally, they value multitasking. There's also a value towards social relationships, building social relationships, than, for example, getting all of the tasks on your list done. So, for example, in the global south, they might prioritize doing work with their friends and socializing with their friends. And so we are designing with these workers in Latin America tools that are adapted to that cultural background. And so, as you said, for example, it's all about getting people on the table. Through participatory design, what we're doing is that we're empowering them to be able for them to express how do they imagine the future of these AI technologies. And then we're enabling them to be able to create these tools. We're also designing robots that are better adapted to the global south, that are also more low cost, because that's also a big issue. A lot of these technologies are extremely expensive. And so we're designing with them much more durable technology that is also much more inexpensive, so that it can be used more widely by the population from Latin America. And so these are some of examples about how you can design technology differently. I also want to mention one last thing, that our report is also targeted towards policymakers, governments. So if you're in the global south and you want to start utilizing AI and you want to think about, okay, how do I consider the culture of my country for the creation of AI? How do I promote AI within academia, industry, so that we're all coming together to build AI that is representative of our values as a country? Please check out our report. Our report is also tailored towards those policymakers so that you have an action plan about things that you can do. Also, if you're a startup and you want to start to better connect with the people of your country, of the locals, we also provide guidelines about how to do so. And I think this is also important because that gives you a competitive advantage. You're not going to be designing for the global north as all of the big tech companies are doing. We're helping you to identify that, you know what, if you start to design for the global south, there are many new opportunities that you can target there.
That's so smart. Yeah, because I guess that's what it's missing. So maybe coming to the end, do you have like one advice that you would like to give people? I mean, you are the experts. You work all day with AI systems, and for people who are using AI, like the chatbots every day, something you want to give them, like as an advice, how to use them. I mean, we understand now they're not neutral, but maybe there's one thing you want them to understand when using these systems.
I think it's very helpful if you think about AI as your collaborator, but where you have maybe expert knowledge about your own culture. And so if you input your expert knowledge of your culture with what the AI is giving you, you can create very unique things. So it's this combination of the human and AI knowledge. And so always think about, okay, what information might the AI be missing that I, as an expert from my own culture, do understand and can input into the AI to make something unique that nobody else can make. I think there you can have very interesting collaborations with the AI.
Yes, interesting. Lili?
Definitely. It's like in the kitchen, you are the chef and the AI is your helper, and you can just give him ingredients, give him the recipe, how to do this, how to do that. But you have the creative factor, just like Dr. Saiph said. And also, some people tend to be a little bit scared of AI, but it's okay to be skeptical, but maybe not extra dismissive. And that is why there are being these efforts so that AI remains ethical and safe and helpful.
Well, Thank you so much, Dr. Saiph Savage, Lili Savage. Thank you so much for your time and for all these insights. Thank you so much.
Vielen Dank.
Sehr gern. That brings us to the end of this episode. If you would like to read the study by Dr. Saiph Savage and Lili Savage, please take a look at the show notes for this episode. There you will find the link to the study, Inclusive and Secure Artificial Intelligence. And as I said, I highly recommend reading it. It's a benefit really for everybody. And if you're interested in learning more about the topic of secure AI, you can also have a look at another recently published study within the IFA research program. Se-Young Choi and Miro Bucher explore the possibility to make AI more inclusive and participatory through a concept called AI as a cultural commons. A year ago, we spoke with Octavio Cules about the transformative impact of AI on international cultural relations. And if you would like to learn more about this topic, I recommend listening to that episode. You can find this and over 80 other episodes on foreign cultural policy wherever you listen to your podcast, such as Spotify, Apple Music, or Deezer. And you can also find out more about IFA and our projects on our social media channels. On Instagram, you will find the profile with the handle at ifa.de and on LinkedIn as IFA, Institut für Auslandsbeziehungen. If you have any questions or comments about the cultural mediators, please send us an email to podcast@ifa.de. With that, I say goodbye. My name is Amira El Ahl. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, bye-bye.